Shirley Jones will forever be remembered as the smiling mother at the center of the Partridge Family. Week after week in the 1970s, she climbed onto that painted bus, sang beside her children, and gave America a picture of harmony that felt almost too perfect to be real. For millions of fans, she was the ideal TV mom, graceful, patient, always ready with a song and a smile. But the truth behind that perfect image was far more complicated. Shirley carried secrets the audience never guessed. There were moments of deep frustration, sacrifices that cost her dearly, and even family connections that most viewers never realized. She held it all inside, letting the show define her while her real struggles stayed hidden. Fans saw only the music and laughter, not the weight that came with it. And now, at last, Shirley Jones has opened up. She's revealed the truths that were buried behind the bright lights and fanfare. What really happened on that set? What did she give up to play America's mother? And why did it take her so long to finally admit it? When the Partridge Family first hit American television screens in the fall of 1970, it arrived like a burst of color in a world still shaken by the turbulence of the 1960s. Families were hungry for something wholesome, something that reminded them of unity and optimism. ABC executives believed they had found the perfect formula: a widowed mother and her 5 children forming a band, singing together and touring the country on a painted school bus that became instantly iconic. At the center of that vision was Shirley Jones. By then she was already a household name, celebrated for her Oscar-winning performance in Elmer Gantry, and beloved for her roles in Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals like Oklahoma and Carousel. She was an accomplished actress who had proven she could move between stage, film, and television with grace. When the opportunity for the Partridge Family came, however, it was more than just another job. Shirley later admitted she took the role partly because it allowed her to stay close to home and raise her 3 sons. It was practical, it was steady, and it seemed harmless. A light-hearted show meant to entertain families on Friday nights. The producers designed the series as a vehicle for music as much as comedy. Inspired by the real-life family band the Cowsills, the Partridge Family had to strike a delicate balance between storytelling and song. This was not just a sitcom, it was a pop culture experiment. If it worked, they could sell records and merchandise alongside TV episodes. If it failed, it would vanish after a season, another casualty in an overcrowded schedule. That risk was real. The late 1960s had seen dozens of musical shows crash quickly, forgotten almost as soon as they premiered. But then came the casting choice that changed everything: David Cassidy. At just 20 years old, he was Shirley's real-life stepson, though that fact was carefully downplayed in publicity at first. Handsome, charming, and brimming with charisma, David was cast as Keith Partridge, the eldest son. Almost overnight, he became a teen idol. His face was plastered on every magazine cover, his voice filled stadiums, and his image sold millions of records. The producers had struck gold, but with that success came pressures no one could have predicted. Shirley found herself not only playing the mother on screen, but also navigating the reality of watching her stepson become an international sensation. The family dynamic of the show reflected the cultural shift of the time. Unlike the strict father figures of earlier sitcoms like Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver, the Partridge Family presented a household led by a strong, independent mother. This was new, even radical, for network television. Shirley's role as a widowed matriarch resonated with women who were balancing their own families, their own work, and their own changing roles in society. The show's success was not only about catchy songs, but about presenting a vision of family that felt modern and inclusive. By the end of its first season, the Partridge Family had become a genuine phenomenon. The theme song, "Come On Get Happy," was a chart-topping hit. Lunchboxes, posters, and bubblegum cards flew off the shelves. Fan clubs formed across the country. For ABC, the gamble had paid off. For Shirley, it meant recognition from a new generation of fans, not for her Broadway voice or her Oscar, but for her smile, her patience, and her image as the nation's mom. Yet, beneath the ratings and applause, Shirley could already sense the complications. Her identity as a serious actress was being overshadowed. The network wanted her as the anchor of a family fantasy, not the complex performer she had spent years becoming. And as David's star exploded, Shirley began to realize that the show she thought would be light and easy was turning into something far more demanding. The Partridge Family had given her a new role in pop culture, but what it demanded of her and what it cost her would only become clear in the years that followed. On The Partridge Family, Shirley Jones embodied the perfect balance of warmth, wisdom, and calm. She was the mother who never lost her patience, who supported her children through every adventure, and who turned life's challenges into a cheerful song. But when the cameras stopped, her own life looked very different. In reality, Shirley was married to actor Cassidy. That meant her days didn't end when she left the studio. After long hours under the hot lights, memorizing lines and recording music, she would head home to children who needed their mother just as much as the fictional Partridges needed hers. For Shirley, the exhaustion was constant. To audiences, she looked endlessly composed. In private, she sometimes felt stretched thin, caught between her responsibilities as a working actress and as a mother. The contrast between her screen persona and her real self created a strange double life. Fans assumed Shirley was exactly like the role she played, and letters poured in from people who believed she was America's mother, both on and off screen. But Shirley knew that the cheerful, unshakable Mrs. Partridge was a carefully scripted illusion. At home, there were arguments, messy mornings, and moments when she felt overwhelmed. What fans celebrated as natural ease was, for Shirley, often the hardest performance of all. The situation was even more complicated because of David Cassidy. To the world, Shirley and David's mother-son bond looked genuine, and in some ways it was, but not in the way audiences thought. David was her real-life stepson, Cassidy's son from his first marriage. Their family connection blurred the lines between reality and fiction. Shirley cared for David deeply, but she also worried about him. She knew how unprepared he was for the tidal wave of fame that hit when the show exploded in popularity. As the world saw a picture-perfect family on TV, Shirley lived with the knowledge that her stepson was under pressures no script could capture. The production itself added another layer of difficulty. Because The Partridge Family was both a sitcom and a music machine, the cast juggled acting with recording. Shirley, a trained singer, was capable, but the schedule was grueling and often frustrating. Studio musicians performed most of the tracks, while Shirley and David carried the recognizable vocals. Fans believed they were watching a real family band, when in truth the process was heavily manufactured. Shirley went along with it, but she later admitted the experience left her conflicted. She knew it wasn't authentic, and she missed the artistry of the musicals that had defined her earlier career. Then there was the matter of typecasting. Shirley had won an Academy Award. She had starred in some of the most celebrated musicals of her generation. Yet, as the show grew in popularity, she found herself increasingly confined to one image: Mrs. Partridge. It was flattering, but limiting. Casting directors stopped offering her the kind of complex roles she once relished. The very success that made her a television icon was quietly narrowing her opportunities elsewhere. Still, Shirley carried all of it quietly. She smiled for press interviews, performed her scenes with charm, and kept her private exhaustion out of public view. To the fans, she was exactly who they wanted her to be, their television mother. Only later, when she began to reflect openly on her career, did the truth emerge about how heavy the balance had been. And at the heart of that truth was David Cassidy, the young star whose bond with Shirley was real, but whose struggles revealed the sharpest contrast between the fantasy fans adored and the reality she lived. The most remarkable part of The Partridge Family wasn't the painted bus, the catchy theme song, or even the ratings. It was the chemistry between Shirley Jones and David Cassidy. On screen, Their mother-son bond radiated warmth. It felt effortless, as if it belonged to them before the cameras ever rolled. And in a sense, it did. David was Shirley's real-life stepson. She had been part of his life since the late 1950s, when she married Jack Cassidy. By the time the show began, she had already watched him grow from a boy into a young man. That history gave their scenes a tenderness no director could script. When she looked at him with quiet pride, she wasn't faking it. When he shot back with affection or defiance, it carried echoes of their real family dynamic. Audiences thought it was flawless casting. In truth, it was something much deeper. But their bond was never without tension. Shirley was already an established star, an Academy Award winner, a respected Broadway name. David was just beginning, and almost overnight he became a global teen idol. Girls fainted at his concerts, tabloids fought for every photo, and his life was swallowed by attention. Shirley knew what fame could do. She had weathered its highs and lows herself. Yet watching it happen to David was different. She later admitted that while she felt maternal pride, she also felt powerless. She could advise him, steady him when he faltered, but she could not shield him from the hurricane that was consuming his life. The hardest part was seeing how frustrated David became with the role that made him famous. He didn't want to be just Keith Partridge, smiling and singing lightweight songs written by studio producers. He longed to be taken seriously as a musician, to write his own material, to step out of the box the network had built for him. Shirley understood that pain all too well. She too had felt boxed and trapped as the forever wholesome leading lady when she wanted more complex work. In later years, she confessed that she recognized herself in David's struggle. She could see in his eyes the same restlessness she had once carried, the same hunger to be more than the image the industry demanded. And yet, their bond endured. Even when David grew resentful of the show, he never lost his respect for Shirley. He later spoke of her as the one constant presence who gave him balance when fame threatened to unmoor him completely. For Shirley, those words mattered. Decades later, after David's decline and eventual passing, she reflected on what their relationship had meant. She said she loved him as her own, that she was proud of the joy he brought to so many, and that she still carried sadness knowing she couldn't save him from the toll of his fame. What fans never knew was that every smile she gave him on screen was laced with real love, and a quiet fear of what that love could not protect. To America, they were the perfect mother and son. To Shirley, they were family bound by love, by regret, and by a truth she only dared to share decades later. For all its brightness on screen, the Partridge Family set was not the carefree playground fans imagined. The laughter, the music, and the smiles were carefully produced. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was more complicated, filled with long hours, creative frustrations, and moments of tension that fans never saw. The first challenge was the sheer grind of production. Sitcoms of the era moved at a relentless pace. Scripts had to be shot quickly, music had to be recorded, and episodes had to be delivered on time every week. Shirley recalled that the schedule often left the cast drained, particularly the youngest performers. Susan Day, just a teenager when she was cast as Laurie, was learning the craft on the job. She later admitted the pressure left her shy and self-conscious, even though fans thought she looked effortlessly confident on screen. Danny Bonaduce, cast as Shirley's wisecracking middle son, battled a different struggle. His home life was troubled, and the set became both a refuge and a place of added strain, as his fame clashed with his personal insecurities. The music created another source of unease. Although the Partridge Family was marketed as a family band, the truth was more manufactured. Only Shirley and David provided the real vocals on the hit records. The others were sidelined, their contributions limited to appearances on screen. For Susan, who had a keen interest in music, this was frustrating. For Danny, it underscored that he was more of a comic sidekick than a genuine band member. Shirley, a seasoned singer herself, found it disheartening. She had built her career on authenticity, and now she was part of an industry illusion. Fans believed the group they saw on TV was the same one on the records. Shirley knew the reality was very different. Personality clashes also surfaced. David's sudden fame made him the center of attention, and that imbalance was not easy for everyone else to accept. Danny, quick-witted and mischievous, sometimes bristled at being overshadowed, channeling his frustrations into pranks or rebellious energy on set. Shirley often stepped in to calm situations, keeping the peace when youthful energy risked derailing the day's work. She later said that her maternal instincts weren't just for the cameras. She was constantly managing egos, moods, and tensions in real life. For Shirley herself, the hardest part was watching David chafe under the image imposed on him. He wanted to be a serious musician, to write and record songs that reflected his own style. Instead, the producers pushed bubblegum pop hits, capitalizing on his teen idol status. Shirley saw the toll this took, and it weighed heavily on her. She empathized because she too was being typecast, stuck as Mrs. Partridge when she longed to play more complex roles. On set, their frustrations quietly paralleled each other, though the fans saw only the smiles. Adding to the complexity were the personal challenges outside of work. Danny's unstable home life sometimes spilled over onto the set, and Shirley became a surrogate mother figure, offering guidance and comfort he couldn't always find elsewhere. Susan, shy and reserved, leaned on Shirley for support when the attention from fame felt overwhelming. For both, Shirley was more than just a co-star. She was the steadying presence that kept them grounded. And yet, despite the hidden struggles, Shirley kept the set together. She worked tirelessly, not only to perform her role, but to make sure the younger cast survived the pressures of sudden fame. Without her quiet leadership, many believed the show might not have lasted as long as it did. Fans at home never guessed how much she carried behind the scenes, or how deeply it changed her. But even as Shirley kept the family together on screen and off, she carried her own secret, that the show's success came with a personal cost she would only admit years later. For decades, fans thought the Partridge Family was nothing but joy for Shirley Jones. They imagined she cherished every moment of playing America's mother and basked in the success of a show that became a cultural landmark. But when Shirley finally began to open up years later, a different truth came forward, one she had carried quietly through the show's peak and long afterward. The first reality was sacrifice. When Shirley agreed to star in the Partridge Family, she thought it would be a light, short-lived project, perhaps a season or two before moving on to more serious work. Instead, the series became a phenomenon that consumed 4 years of her career. Offers for challenging film roles faded away, and she found herself boxed in by the image of the gentle, smiling TV mom. As an Oscar-winning actress, she sometimes wondered if she had traded away the chance for deeper roles in order to play it safe. The second truth was artistic frustration. Shirley was a trained singer, with a background in Broadway and Hollywood musicals. She could deliver power and nuance in song, but the Partridge Family reduced her to simple, sugary tunes that prioritized marketability over artistry. She later admitted she didn't feel proud of the music. She performed it dutifully, but it lacked the richness of the work she loved. Fans adored the records, yet Shirley herself often felt like she was lending her voice to an illusion rather than truly creating. The third was guilt. David Cassidy's fame spiraled into something neither he nor Shirley could control. She had tried to protect him, offering advice and stability, but she later confessed she sometimes felt she failed him. He became trapped in the machinery of teen idol culture, pushed into concerts and publicity he didn't want, and burdened with expectations that ate away at his peace of mind. Shirley carried regret that she couldn't shield him more, even though she had no real power to stop it. That regret never left her, especially in later years when David's struggles became more visible. The fourth was the weight of dual lives. Shirley had 3 young sons at home, who needed their mother, yet 5 days a week, she played mother to a fictional family watched by millions. She later admitted there were moments when she felt torn, as if she was giving the best of herself to the wrong children. Her own boys sometimes resented the attention she poured into a role that made other children feel closer to her than they did. It was an impossible balance, and one Shirley carried quietly, unwilling to let the public know the strain it caused inside her own home. The fifth truth was her loneliness. Surrounded by cast, crew, and fans, Shirley often felt isolated. Her marriage to Jack Cassidy was unraveling, burdened by infidelity and conflict, even as she maintained her polished image on screen. To the outside world, she seemed like a woman who had it all. Inside, she often felt she had lost control of the very things that mattered most. And finally, the truth she kept longest was that the Partridge Family, while beloved, was never the career high point for her personally. It was a steady job, a cultural milestone, and a role that made her beloved by millions. But it was also a compromise. She gave the world what it wanted, but it came at the cost of what she herself had dreamed. To fans, she had given nothing but happiness. To Shirley, the truth was more complex, and it was only in later years that she dared to admit what the show had truly cost her. When the Partridge Family ended in 1974, Shirley Jones was at a crossroads. For 4 years she had been the anchor of one of television's most beloved families. Now she was free. But the freedom came with challenges she hadn't anticipated. The first hurdle was typecasting. Casting directors and audiences alike struggled to see her as anything other than Mrs. Partridge. Serious film roles that might have once come her way were now out of reach. Shirley, who had won an Academy Award for Elmer Gantry and starred in classic musicals, found herself gently pushed to the side in Hollywood. She admitted later that breaking away from the Partridge image was harder than she ever imagined. Every audition, every conversation began with her television role, as if her earlier achievements had been erased. At the same time, Shirley's personal life was shifting dramatically. Her marriage to Jack Cassidy collapsed under the strain of infidelity and turmoil. The split was painful, but Shirley pressed forward, raising her sons and rebuilding her sense of stability. Later, she found companionship in Marty Ingalls, whose humor and warmth contrasted sharply with Jack's volatility. Their marriage would last until his death, a surprising match that endured despite the skepticism of many outsiders. Professionally, Shirley refused to fade quietly into the background. She returned to the stage where she could reclaim the artistry she loved most. Musical theater gave her the chance to use her voice in a way the Partridge Family never allowed. Audiences who came expecting Mrs. Partridge discovered the powerhouse soprano who had once dazzled Broadway. It was in these performances that Shirley reconnected with her true self, reminding both the public and herself of the range she still possessed. Television continued to call as well. Shirley appeared in a string of TV movies and guest roles, often playing maternal figures, but occasionally breaking expectations with more dramatic turns. These projects never matched the cultural footprint of the Partridge Family, but they allowed her to keep working and to stay visible in an industry that often discarded actresses once they passed a certain age. She built a career of endurance, adapting again and again as the years went on. In later decades, Shirley began to speak more candidly about her experiences. In interviews and in her memoir, she opened up about the hidden costs of the Partridge Family, her complicated marriage to Jack Cassidy, and her pride in her children's careers, especially Sean, who became a successful actor and producer in his own right. By sharing these stories, she reclaimed her narrative from the myths that had defined her for so long. Perhaps most striking were her reflections on David Cassidy. Long after the show ended, their bond remained a central part of her life. She spoke of his struggles, his triumphs, and the sorrow she felt watching his battles in later years. For Shirley, the show had given her a role she would never escape, but it had also tied her forever to David's story. That connection became one of the most enduring legacies of the Partridge Family. By the time Shirley reached her later years, she was no longer just Mrs. Partridge, nor the ingenue from Oklahoma. She was something greater, a woman finally willing to tell the truth about what it all meant. Looking back, Shirley Jones came to see the Partridge Family as both a gift and a burden. It gave her global fame, a place in television history, and an enduring bond with millions of fans who still cherish the show. Yet it also defined her in ways she hadn't chosen, locking her inside an image she spent years trying to outgrow. Her later reflections were filled with honesty. She admitted the frustrations, the typecasting, the shallow songs, the exhaustion of playing America's mother while managing her own private challenges. But she also acknowledged the pride. She understood that the Partridge Family offered joy to an entire generation, especially children, who saw the Partridges as the family they wished they had. That knowledge softened her regrets. In her memoirs and interviews, Shirley balanced these truths with grace. She spoke openly about David Cassidy, calling him both her stepson and her colleague, expressing pride in his talent and sorrow for his struggles. She honored the cast who grew alongside her, especially the younger ones who leaned on her for support, and she embraced the fans, whose love for the show never faded. In the end, Shirley's legacy wasn't just about a painted bus or a sitcom. It was about a woman who carried contradictions, sacrifices, and pride, and who finally shared the truth after decades of silence. Shirley Jones will forever be remembered as the heart of the Partridge Family. To audiences, she was the smiling mother who kept her children, and the show itself, together. But the truth she later revealed is more powerful than the image that once defined her. She admitted the sacrifices, the frustrations, and the weight of being typecast. She confessed her fears for David Cassidy, her pride in his talent, and her sorrow at watching fame consume him. She reflected on the double life she lived, one as America's ideal mother, another as a woman quietly struggling to hold her own world together. And yet, through it all, Shirley never lost her resilience. Her story is one of endurance, a reminder that even behind the brightest smiles, there are unseen battles. The Partridge Family was never just a sitcom. It was a turning point in Shirley's life, one that brought her both joy and regret, pride and pain. By finally sharing what fans never knew, she transformed her legacy from myth into truth. For millions who grew up watching, that truth only deepens the love they feel for her today. For more emotional stories, check out this video.